Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Joey Moments podcast. My name is Joey. I have Joey Moments. And this week I am joined by one of my closest friends, Mac.
Hi, I'm Mac.
So I'll probably turn it just a little bit more, which is A-okay.
That's what I was talking about, that bad habit. It starts recording and I start whispering.
It's A-okay.
I'm trying to turn this into an ASMR podcast.
You know, I have not watched a whole lot of ASMR ever. And this week I was trying to find a unboxing video of a particular piece of merchandise that I had never seen someone unbox. And so I hunted down on YouTube a video of that, and I found one, and it was ASMR, and I was like, well, I'll watch it, because I've seen ASMR unboxings where it's just the sound of boxes being cut open and the wrappers and, you know, that stuff. And no, the guy was talking throughout it, and his voice just gave me the biggest ick of my life. I was like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why people do these videos without talking. Your voice is creeping me out really bad. Hardcore. I had to stop like 35 seconds in.
Some of those ASMR people are just weird. They they'll try to do the...
Yeah. No, yeah, that's absolutely how some of them are. And it's interesting, I think, sometimes, because some of them are genuinely really nice people and they seem really chill. And then you watch their videos and you're just like,
Yeah.
your voice is...
Maybe find a different career.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
we
or
can't all
talk in
be
a
good at
normal
everything.
voice.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think the talking like this is really weird. I don't
Just
get it.
eating the
And it's not
mic.
for me. That's what I'll say about it. It's not for me. I understand that there are people who really do thoroughly enjoy that content. They have a lot more views than I do. So obviously they're doing something right. But also at the same time, I'm just like, I could not watch hours upon hours of that.
It's weird. I used to watch the foam ones. Have you ever seen those, the floral foam?
I haven't, but I've seen the slime ones, which
The
I know
slime
is
ones
like
can
in
be
the
very
same
good.
kind of
With those
category.
styrofoam pebbles, making it all crunchy.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good. I also like ASMR IRL with keyboards.
Okay.
I brought my own keyboard into work because the sound my work one made, horrific. It was like dull. It sounded like an echo of itself.
Yep.
Horrible.
I just recently this past Christmas I built my keyboard. So I did a semi build, I guess. It was the board and the chassis were pre-assembled, and then I just put the keycaps in and the actual switches. So I got to pick my switches and everything.
I need to do that.
I love it. The keycaps I wasn't super happy with. The switches though, oh my god, they're so tactile and they
That's the
click
part that
so
matters.
much.
Yeah.
Oh, every time my mic's on, because I have the feedback, so I hear my mic in my headset, and I'll hear myself clicking when there's nobody in there, and I'm just like, oh.
It's such a good sound. That's ASMR. You got
Yep.
tricked.
And I've seen videos like that. Like I'll watch keyboard reviews. Like when I was getting into that, I was like, okay, which switches do I want? What's the difference between, MX Blue or MX Brown or, the other types of not like cherry switches, different switches and all that. And so I would just listen to people typing with them. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the one I want because that's loud. And it's
Nice and
clicky.
loud, yep.
It's not just loud, but it sounds like a click.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
Like someone snapping a peanut. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
And
what
so-
you need.
and especially when I play games like World of Warcraft or League of Legends or Sea of Thieves or something where I'm just constantly smashing my keyboard. Yeah, it's great. I can understand why people spend so much money building keyboards.
Yeah. One day I hope to have like those acrylic magazine holder things that you can like hang on your wall. I just want a wall full of keyboards, and then whatever I'm in the mood for, I've
You
got
just go and
something
grab it.
already ready. Yeah.
That
Instead of trying to rebuild every time I want something new.
No, that's a cool idea just to have that. I've seen people like that, like who have like Twitch setups, and they'll have like their backdrop. Bitwit, I think, has one right above his setup, and him and his girlfriend setup because I think they share a room now. And they have just a bunch of keyboards and mice and headsets, so
All on
they'll just
display.
switch out whenever they want to switch one. And I'm just like, oh, that's a cool idea. It's an expensive idea, but it's almost like a nerdy tool rack.
Yes,
So
exactly.
my grandfather had that in his garage. He had the giant wire rack where he hung all of his tools. And I always liked that. Like when I buy a house eventually, I want my garage to have a tool rack and a tool bench, and
Yeah.
because I just like doing stuff with my hands. Like I guess that's probably why I like Lego so much, because I can just sit there and I can just fidget, which
Yeah.
I do. Like today we were playing WoW and we were in a queue for like a half hour. I was just sitting there messing with shit on my desk
Yeah.
because I can't stay still for that long, especially if we're not doing anything and I'm just sitting at my desk. That's what'll happen is I'll get bored if I do that, and then I have to go do something else. So, which some of the games our friends play, I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
they're playing their own game. They have their little group. I'm not doing anything. They're at the limit of how many people can play that game. So I either have to play a game by myself, or I'm just going to sit at my desk. And if I sit at my desk, I'll get bored and I'll stop playing games. I'll get off and go watch TV. Because when I watch TV, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can sit down and I can watch TV. I cannot just sit at my desk. Even watching YouTube at my desk is hard now.
The TV is a lot more stimulating, I think. Like, you know, especially now, like we're watching, right now me and Chris are in the middle of watching The Bear, the most recent season.
Yep.
And every frame is so detailed, and that you can tell that there's like this team of like 30 or 40 people working on every single second so that it's filled with like meaning and a beautiful shot and great audio. And
yep, that show,
insane. It's
I have not
gorgeous.
watched it. I'm waiting for season 3 to wrap up before I dive into it. Because I am a victim of binge culture.
It's hard not to be.
To wait. And I was complaining about it this week because binge culture has done other things to that industry. But I now like to wait for whole seasons to be out so I can just watch it all. But the other thing that sucks about that, the flip side, is that with binge culture, we get shorter shows now. Yeah. And I was complaining about that because that 90s show came out this week. One of my favorite all-time shows of all time is that 70s show. I adore that show. I had it on last night at the house.
Yeah.
And
it's a great show.
I adore it. I watched it for the first time right after I moved here to Nebraska, and it was just something that I latched on. Like that first summer was really hard for a lot of reasons, moving, trying to meet friends, and it was something I latched onto really well. When I met Eric, I called him for probably the first year I knew him. I would call him Eric Foreman.
Yeah.
Partially because it was a joke, partially because I did not know his last name and I couldn't remember it.
It's
he had
pretty
told me
close.
at one point.
Foreman's very close, honestly.
And he was just like, I think he told me at one point, and I was just like, I don't remember that. And then at some point it clicked.
It's hard too.
And so with that 90s show coming out, I liked it. I thought, oh, you know, the actors are still finding their groove. And it was only 10 episodes the first season. And I was like, it makes sense because you're not going to do 26 episodes, something you don't know is going to be successful.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're going to find the groove. You don't know if people are going to latch onto the nostalgia of it. They did a really good job with it. I thought they did really well. It felt like the first season of the first show. You were seeing a bunch of teenagers who were finding their groove as these characters. And it's especially hard when you're acting in a universe that's already established. There are characters that people are emotionally attached to, especially when two of the main characters are children of the main characters from the previous show.
Yeah.
There's a lot of established stuff and setting that has to go into that. It's I think for any actor, especially a teenager, that's going to be really hard to step foot in and pick it up and go. And they did a really good job. So season 2, I was really excited. And it came out, and it's 8 episodes.
That's so annoying.
I watched 8 episodes. I watched it while I was at work, and I watched it in a single day at work. And I was so disappointed when I got to episode 8 and it ended, and it tried to put on, I think, Bridgerton. It tried to just auto-cue whatever the popular show on Netflix is.
Right.
Which I've heard that show's good, but I have no interest in that one.
Me either. I don't think it's for us.
No, I definitely
I think that's for straight women.
Probably. I think it's for
just
straight middle-aged women.
Honestly, a lot of my coworkers have been, and most of my coworkers are like 26 to 35. All of them are watching it. All of them love
I've seen a lot of stuff on my TikTok about it, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I'll every time I see something pop up consistently on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, or Reddit, I go look at it. I'm just like, what's the hype? What's the buzz? What's going on? Why is this blowing up? Because if it's something that's interesting, I'll go, I'll watch it. And I was like, oh no, I can't do this, and which is funny because I watched all of Grey's Anatomy. I'm not the target audience for Grey's Anatomy, but that story is in and of itself really funny because Tyler was watching it and I made fun of him for watching it. I poked the bear on that one. my phone heard me. It heard me. And so the next day, my TikTok for like the next like 3 days was just Grey's Anatomy, like all the time on my For You page. And
I
I was
hate
like,
that happens. It scares me.
and it was all season 1 content too. Like it did not give me anything past the first season. It was all really early stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested now. And so I was like, whatever, I'll watch it. And me and Tyler were watching it at the same time. He was way ahead of me. And in like a matter of like a week and a half, I had passed him. And then a couple weeks later, he was telling me, we were talking about it at Jersey's, and he's like, you passed my sister. And then I had finished it. And I was like, oh my God. Then to find out that Chris's younger brother, Jacob, has also seen every episode of Grey's Anatomy.
I didn't know that.
I guess I found out that
I know Jenny did.
I found out he likes shows like that.
They also watched, he's the one who actually convinced me to give Riverdale a try. Which I read the Archie comics when I was younger because my dad just had them, and I read whatever he already owned. So I wasn't like totally against it. I just seen what everyone said about it, and that is a quirked up show. It's really crazy, but it's actually really good.
Riverdale, I've heard mixed opinions on it. I've heard some people say it's so good, and then I've heard other people go, it's garbage. And part of me is like, well, I really like Cole Sprouse. I kind of want to just watch it for him.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, I don't know.
His character's the most cringy, honestly.
It's Cole Sprouse. Everything he does is cringy. He
went to NYU. Of course he sucks.
He has a Instagram page where it's just people trying, like, if people try to take pictures of him being all sneaky, he'll pull out his phone and take a picture of him. And it's so funny.
I would do that, though. I would be the one trying to take a sneaky picture. Just be like, I saw this person. Yep. How cool.
And I don't know. I've been to California enough times and then New York with my family that I have seen celebrities. We've met celebrities. Me and my family have met celebrities. And I guess it was partially being a child. You're not shy about that. Like, we were at Disney for something, and I don't think we were on resort, but we were on resort, but we weren't on property, so we weren't like in Disneyland. And Sylvester Stallone was there, and I'm 5 years old. We were there. My grandmother took me there for my 5th birthday, so the whole family went out to do that, it was fun. I wish I could afford to do that now as an adult, but so we were there, and Sylvester Stallone was walking by, and there's paparazzi trying to take pictures or whatever, and he sees the little pin that I'm wearing because I have the giant fat birthday pin, and he comes up and Sylvester Stallone, happy birthday, and he's being nice because he's a very nice person. And my mom has told me, I don't really remember the interaction because it was so long ago. It's almost 20 years ago.
Isn't that crazy?
That's a gross thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
But and I was like, and the reason he came over was because I was pointing and telling my mom, like, grabbing my mom, and I was like, that's the guy from TV. That's the guy from TV. And he recognized, a 5-year-old was recognizing him, and my mom was like, yeah, you should have seen, I wish you could remember that, because he had like this light on his face that a 5-year-old was recognizing him, the adults or whatever, because they've grown up watching, especially that early 2000s with Rocky and all that stuff in the 80s and the 90s. Like, yeah, the adults know who he is. A 5-year-old recognized him, and that lit up his eyes. He was like, oh my God, the kids get it.
When you're working in that industry, you never know what your longevity's like.
Oh yeah,
gonna look like.
And it's like the worst part about entertainment is you can have 15 minutes of fame, or you can have 55 years of fame. But even the fame does not tell you how long your relevancy is going to be.
Right.
You can be a millionaire forever because you were famous for 15 minutes. And I think we're seeing that now with a lot of like the people we grew up watching YouTube on.
Yeah.
A lot of them are retiring, they're leaving, and some of them they're leaving and they're still at the peaks of their popularity.
Right.
And other people are leaving and you're just like, oh, I saw that coming. They haven't been relevant in 5 years, 10 years. Rooster Teeth shut down. I saw that one coming a mile away. It hurt really bad to watch that company crumble because I loved that company. But it was something that like I saw that happening.
Yeah.
Because their relevancy just slowly went down and down. They couldn't figure out how to grab on to it was YouTube they grabbed on and they figured out how that worked. And they predated YouTube. They existed for years before YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
They figured out how YouTube worked and they went, okay, we can make it work. And they did, and they got really popular. And then as soon as they got popular, they stopped growing. And they never figured out how to grow out of that. And, it happens. But it's, for celebrities, I think sometimes it's a little bit different because what happens if you get typecasted?
Yeah.
Sometimes those jobs just don't exist, after, whatever show or movie you're on anymore. Topher Grace from that 70s show who played Eric Foreman, funnily enough, he had a really hard time. Like, he's seen a resurgence in his acting career now, but that's almost 20 years since the show ended, and now he's seen a resurgence. When the show ended, his career was, he was Eric Foreman. That was it. He couldn't get another job. I mean, he was in Spider-Man 3, and he got laughed at.
I thought it was iconic. I thought that movie was great, but I think I was the only one.
I remember seeing that movie opening night because my uncle is a really big comic book movie guy, and so and he's a big action movie guy. So there's a lot of movies growing up that we would go see opening night, which opening night now versus opening night 20 years ago, totally different experience.
I'm pre-2008. There was only a handful of those movies to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they all got sold off because they did not have the box office numbers anyone was hoping they would. And the fact that Lord of the Rings got made before like 2015 was crazy.
Yep, and not only that, but that it's like one of the most highly acclaimed movies of all time. Like, even the prequel to it is not as highly regarded as the original 3 movies. But yeah, and and I don't know if you ever went through this, like, opening night for a movie before you could buy tickets ahead of time. Like, we would buy tickets, but it was not assigned seating.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a nightmare because that was first come, first serve. So we would get to the movie theater hours ahead of the showing to sit in line.
Yeah.
You would sit in line, or in some cases you would stand in line, which was just, I remember doing that for Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, so the second one. We stood in line for like 6 hours to see that movie. The first one, my mom picked me up early from school so we could get in line. And we would sit in line. Then my aunt and uncle would get off work. They'd join us in line because we'd save their spot. And then as soon as the door opened, my job, since I was the youngest one, was to run into the theater and get our seats in the very back of the theater where they like to sit. You don't get experiences like that anymore.
That's such a foreign concept now. Do you remember people used to stand in line for iPhones?
For iPhones, for like everything. Like, I remember doing it for video games. I remember doing it for, like, when I got my Xbox One, I was at Walmart for the midnight launch. And those are such, in my opinion, they were really cool experiences because it was a bunch of people who were interested in the same thing at the same spot as you. And you had to be there for hours, so the only thing you could do was socialize.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I really think about that, and I go, wow, the world's a lot less social now. Because you can order it from home, gets delivered to your house, you never have to interact. You don't even have to interact with the FedEx driver if you don't have to, if you pre-sign for it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to talk to a single human being to get the product that you want now. You want to go see a movie? You can order your drinks and food ahead of time and have it ready for pickup at the counter. You can order your tickets online. The only time you have to talk to someone is to have them tear your stub.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Sometimes I'm envious of people who got to enjoy that a little bit longer than we did, but also sometimes I'm like, well, the convenience is really nice.
Yeah.
But then I feel bad for, like,
having a hobby is such an individual experience now.
Mm-hmm.
And it does really suck as much as it is. It's so evenly, like, shitty and great.
Yep. Well, and then, like, sometimes I think about that too, like the death of forums.
Yeah.
Like, even, like, for hobbies, because, like, there are some niche hobbies that I have. Like, I wanted to build, I still want to. It's cost prohibitive. I want to build a full-size prop replica of the TARDIS from Doctor Who.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a Gundam suit.
No.
I was like, me too.
I mean, me too. I don't think I'll ever have the money for that one.
Oh my God, it's so expensive.
Podcast is going to have to be really good. Let's get those numbers up, guys.
Let's subscribe.
But subscribe, like, share it with your friends, share it with your grandparents,
Download right now. Actually get those download numbers up now.
It's such a weird concept to me that download numbers are such an important statistic still.
Yeah. Because it's just not a thing.
No, and we talked about it week 1 with Tarek, and I went back and I looked at those statistics, what they actually were. And it's still not that different. Like I said, 30 downloads to be in like the top like 15%. It's like 100 to be in the top like 25%. It's 100 downloads.
It's so insane.
But then the difference between the top 25% and the 1% is a difference of like 100,000. Because then you have podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience and stuff like that
Or
do
Serial,
crazy numbers.
when that came out and like everybody was talking about it. Did you ever listen to Serial?
I did not.
It was a time, honestly.
Yeah.
Like podcasts really popped off at that time.
My podcast experience has always been, it was very Rooster Teeth centric, and then it was just very limited. I don't want to say limited. It was always companies that I watched, like big content creators, when they made podcasts. Oh, I listened to them. You know, like Smosh started doing their podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes. It's not my thing. And I think it's just because Ian and Anthony aren't on it all the time. I love the rest of the people at Smosh. Like, I've really grown to like their content, their podcast. I'm just like, oh, it's not exactly for me. They started one last week called Lunchtime with Smosh, which is a return of that concept with Ian and Anthony. And I really enjoyed that one. I was like, oh, okay, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
I like hearing those two people talk.
And that's what got a lot of their most dedicated followers in, was just those two guys. Same with, I mean, and I'm so grateful that I'm like a big Good Mythical Morning person and all their shows, but Rhett and Link committing to always being on their show for this long is insane.
They're funny about it too. Like, they make jokes about it. Like, they did a joke that they had like a TikTok or like a short of, oh, we don't film Good Mythical Morning together. It's just I get up, Rhett gets up really early, Link doesn't get up till 10 a.m. So I'll record it at 7 o'clock, and there's just a little stick with the tennis ball where Link's supposed to be. And I thought that was really funny. And Rhett and Link, they did such a, like, I think it's hard for some people to remember because they've been doing Good Mythical Morning for like 10 years now. It's hard for some people to remember Rhett and Link as the YouTube stars before Good Mythical Morning.
Right.
Like, they were already YouTube famous before Good Mythical Morning, and then they started that podcast, and it shot off. It did its own thing. Like,
That's
that
the
is
thing, yeah.
that is their sustained success. I don't think that what they were doing beforehand was long-term sustainable, because it was partially sketch comedy, which we've seen sketch comedy isn't sustainable.
Not usually, no.
No, like even
a lot
Smosh,
of those commentary guys still do a lot of sketches, but even then, it's not a majority of their content.
Yep, like there was a time where Smosh was the #1 subscribed YouTube channel. They haven't been in the top 20 in like
forever,
8 years.
Hot minute.
You know, and
8 years. It was 2016. Oh my gosh.
Yep. Yeah, you would have been, because you're what, a grade below us, so you would have been a sophomore at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, that would have been around the time I would have met you, because we would have met in band. Yep.
Back in the day, that feels like so long ago.
It was long ago.
Yeah, you were in ROTC.
I was. Yeah, we talked about that with JC. It's a time period I wish.
Was JC in ROTC?
He was.
You guys are weird.
He did it for the gym credit, which is why I did it the first year, and then for whatever reason, I just kind of latched on to I don't know what it was about it, like the community aspect of it.
Right.
Like, I liked band, and I had a lot of friends in band, obviously, because, I was best friends with Eric and Chris. So they did band, but then, Chris stopped doing it. I stopped doing it around the same time Chris did. And there were some people in band that I was like, these are weird people. And, and not like weird in like a mean way, just like weird as in they had some very interesting interests, hobbies, whatever, that I was like,
yeah,
a little outside of my comfort zone at the time. I'm sure now, as comfortable as I am with who I am at this point in my life, I'd get along with those people a lot better. Yeah. High school was definitely a time for me where I was uncomfortable with some of the things that I really liked that were core parts of like my identity, as like things like pop culture stuff that I like, that wise, movies, television. I was very uncomfortable. I was very shy about that. I was like, oh, these are nerdy. These aren't like things that you talk about in public. And now, 10 years later, kids who are going to high school now have it so much easier in a different way than we had it, where all this nerdy shit is mainstream as hell.
Mm-hmm.
In high school, and for us, it was starting to come that way. It was not that way, though.
Yeah.
And I think some of us kind of forget about that, some of the things we talk about were not mainstream popular. Like, talking about Doctor Who
No.
10 years ago, that was not a cool thing to do.
I feel like a lot of people our age really got into it in middle school, which was like 12, 13 years ago.
Yep. And then once you left middle school, though, you got to high school. It's like, that's no longer cool to talk about. It's cool to talk about in 7th and 8th grade. Nope, you're high school now. You can't talk about that. You got to talk about sex and cigarettes and vapes and football games and going to band practice. And I'm just like, I don't know.
I feel like when you're a teenager, it's so easy in general to like something too much that people start like, you either aren't interesting at all and you're not known for anything, or you like it too much. And there's like this balancing act. There's no way to win.
I was one of the kids who was known for liking something way too much. I was the Halo guy.
Oh, were you?
I had people freshman year of high school who were my sister's age. So they were seniors when we were in high school. I had multiple people her age come up to me and go, so I heard you like playing Halo. Here's my gamer tag. Let's play Halo. I'll kick your ass. Your sister says you're really good at it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, thanks. First off, I am really good at it, and you will not kick my ass. But secondly, like, oh, Jesus, fuck, that's the only thing. I played football at the time. I'm like, I hung out with the football people freshman year of high school, and I'm just like, really? I'm still known for fucking playing Halo?
Yeah.
That's it? And
you did band,
it never
football.
left me. And then by the end of high school, I was known as, like, the ROTC kid. And I don't know that I ever wanted that title. And not to say that the ROTC people, like, I was friends with a lot of them, and some of them were off the deep end.
Oh, for sure.
Some of them were really chill, normal people who were doing it because they liked the community aspect of it, or they wanted to go into the military. And some of them were just like, they got into it and they had friends who were in it, and it was just an easy thing to just stay into. Yeah. Personally, if I could go back, I would probably tell myself, hey, don't do it. Just spend your time doing something else, especially because it did eat up a lot of my time because I got really invested into it.
But it also teaches you to be really strict and organized in a way that not a lot of other extracurriculars do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. It's coming, I promise.
It's okay. I'll grab drinks while you sneeze.
I don't think it's coming. Never mind, I was wrong.
You could have been the first person on the podcast to sneeze.
I'll make it happen. Someone get me a feather.
You don't have to worry about it. You don't sneeze, you don't sneeze. It's okay. Someone will get it at some point.
I hope so.
But no, so in high school was a very interesting point. And we didn't really know each other in high school. I knew who you were, and it's very funny because the first time we met, I was told that, this is who Chris is dating, because I had just moved back from Tampa.
Yep.
So I was, and in that period of living in Tampa, I did play games with them frequently. I did talk to them frequently, but the real life events and what people were doing with their lives was something I was kind of out of the loop on. Mm-hmm. So I moved back, and Eric's like, okay, this is who Chris is dating. And I was like, that name sounds kind of familiar. Like, do I know that person? Eric was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is the person? And then he was like, this is who she is. And I was like, oh, okay, I know that person. And then I saw you, and I was like, and then I saw you, and I was like, I would not have recognized you.
No, I look so different. I'm not bleach blonde and 110 pounds. So anymore.
And I was like, oh, okay. And then that night in and of itself was just interesting. I embarrassed myself, and Eric was like, Mac's going to hate you now. Mac's not going to like you.
I don't hate you.
I'm glad.
I don't know why Eric made people think that about me.
I don't think he was trying to, set like this weird thing. He was just, I said a couple things, and he was like, yeah, that's gonna rub them the wrong way. And I was like, God damn it, dude, first impressions are super important. And I'm a very big person on first impressions. They're like, in my mind, if your first impression's bad, it sets you up for failure. It's going to be really hard to build any type of friendship or relationship out of that afterwards. If your first impression's really good, even if you drop the bar a little bit, the bar is up here.
Right.
And at that point in my mind, I was like, oh my God, the bar's like on the ground. And I was like, son of a bitch.
I never got a bad first impression from anyone other than Marshall.
You had a bad first impression with Marshall?
Yeah, because he was just being weird. The first time I met him, he was being weird. He was talking about, like, I don't know. He was talking about the military. And listen, I have some complex views on the military. And I was like, Marshall, we are not going to be friends. And then the next time I actually hung out with him, we had a really good talk. And I was like, oh, you're not as weird as you made yourself seem last time.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
He made himself seem so, like, red-pilled.
Marshall is such a interesting person because him and JC both, because they give off your super blue collar, super, like,
well, Marshall is blue collar.
They both are, but they give off the super, like, your stereotypical, like, mean, like, blue collar worker. I'm gonna, I'm gonna work my job. I want to come home. I want my girlfriend or my wife to bring me a beer, and I want to watch football.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you. Don't interact with me. And they give off that, like, external impression. Mm-hmm. And then they're just the nicest people on earth.
Right.
Like Marshall, living with Marshall for a year, I was like, oh my God, you are, like, one of genuinely the nicest people I've ever fucking met. And the way he treats Zoe is also the same way. It's oh my God, you're a giant fucking sweetheart.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I'm like, wow. Holy shit. Like, the first time I met Marshall was in high school, so it's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. I, came back from Tampa and I saw Marshall. I'm like, oh my God, he's great.
Yeah.
Great. This is the people we're friends with now. It's Nebraska. What were the choices?
Yeah.
And I started talking to Marshall and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I lived next to Marshall and I was like, oh, okay. This is who this guy is. Yeah. He's a softie.
He's just a country boy.
Yep. Yeah,
he can't help it. He comes off as, like, ultra conservative weirdo for about 5 seconds, and then you realized he just had old parents.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's very true.
His parents were just more mature. Because my parents had me at 25, and I was their 4th child.
My mom had me at 21.
Oh wow! So you get it better than I do.
Yeah, and I'm an only child. So, my sister. I have my sister. My sister, I guess some Joey lore. My sister's my aunt. We're just so close in age. We're a 3-year age difference that I've always just referred to her as my sister in conversation. It's easier, and our relationship is much more like a brother-sister relationship than an aunt-uncle or aunt-nephew relationship. Yeah. We don't have an aunt-nephew relationship really at all. Mm-hmm. And so it's just the way we've always interacted has been much more sibling-like, at least on my end. She might perceive things differently. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with her about it.
Does she know you call her your sister?
Yeah.
And she probably would have said something.
She's known that since I moved here, which was 13, 14 years ago. So we are going to take a brief intermission.
Should I take the label away?
No, I don't think so. I mean, okay. I don't think it should be too big of a deal. We've always shown the labels. We're going to take a brief intermission, though, because I'm going to restart the camera because I think it probably stopped.
Okay.
Okay. You may have noticed that we moved around a little bit. Things maybe moved around. We did take a small little intermission to either, smoke nicotine or to reset the camera, whatever we needed to take a break for. So welcome back to the second half of the podcast. I'm sure I'll put a little funny insert into the middle.
Beautiful.
This will be the first full-length podcast, which I'm super excited about because we have not been able to get to that length yet. Mm-hmm. Technical limitations. The camera's been a really big pain in the butt about it. The pod track is great. I love that. It works. It does its thing. The camera does not. The camera fights me every time we record.
Not friendly.
No, and like you were just saying off camera, we don't talk a whole lot.
Not one-on-one, yeah.
Off camera, very often. And it's also just part of that we don't, at least I don't see you and Chris very often at all, which is completely understandable.
Yeah, this past year especially. Full-time parenting, wedding planning, I've been in school, and Chris got this new job. Oh my God, he is out of town. He has probably spent a total of like 35 days since he started there in October, out of town.
That's
just
crazy.
all over the Midwest, climbing on ladders and almost killing himself.
He has a tendency to get jobs where he has to travel.
Yeah.
It's
almost like he does it on purpose.
I think the last 3 jobs he's traveled because he traveled at this job, the one that he had before this, and then yeah. I didn't know if I wanted to name
Bleep.
drop that company. I might censor that. I don't know that I want to give them any type of free advertising.
They don't need it.
No, that company especially was just fucking miserable to work for.
I believe it.
So
Yeah. No,
again, I will censor out their name.
Good.
But
okay.
My experience with that company, much like Chris's, was a difference in cultural attitude. So, which makes sense, you know, when it lines up with the, hey, your vibe doesn't match. I got vibe checked when they fired me. That was basically what they said, and I was like, okay, all right, thanks.
So
you know,
funny.
It was, yeah. I came home. I don't know if you've ever heard the audio clip. There's an audio clip of that day, the day I got fired from them. I got home and I sat down at my desk, and I'm on 45 minutes early than I normally would be, and I log in and they're just like, why are you on so early? I'm just like, guess who lost their job? And so that was the first time I'd ever gotten fired from a job. So I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But they
were just haters. Honestly. They were preying on your downfall.
And
they're preying on everyone's downfall, honestly.
Well, yeah, they need you to be in jail.
That's why
So.
prison wardens love them and normal people hate them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes perfectly good sense.
But yeah, so
that was an era. You and Chris were working together
for all of 3 months.
We were living across the street.
And then he tells me, he goes, I'm so sorry, but I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And I was like, you just had me get this fucking job.
And then we moved out of that apartment. We just dipped out.
Which, to be fair, you guys went into a much nicer apartment.
I love the place
was
we're in now.
massive.
I would love to own a home.
Me too.
That'd be so nice.
I would love to. Renting this house has been, when you have a house this big, it's almost like a preview into what that would entail, because we see the little things that break, the little things that stop working, the things that need to be touched up. And it's like, wow, if this was my responsibility, this would be expensive.
Yeah.
You know, oh, the garbage disposal didn't work. I call the landlord. They come check it out. If it was on us, I'd have to spend like $150 to put it in.
Yeah.
You know, oh, the faucet broke. Shit, got to replace it. You know, oh, the floorboard wore out and the little lip between the dining room and the kitchen's gone. Got to go get more wood lining and get it installed. Oh, the screen door fell off. Time to get a new screen door. So
there's arsenic poisoning in your grass.
Yep. And
your dog can't touch it.
It's such an interesting time. And again, luckily this house has been so great, and it gives us so much space. It's such a big house. There's space for all four of us to exist kind of in our own realm.
Yeah.
Independently if we want to. And we have the shared spaces, but even then, like, me and JC will hang out in the living room a lot, or in the kitchen, like preparing food or whatever when we hang out there. But then, you know, a lot of times he'll sit upstairs either at his desk in the foyer, or he'll be at his chair in the living room. I'll be down in the basement with the dog. The cats are upstairs. John will be in his room, and Z will be in his room or down in the basement with me, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, if Z's not home, the three of us, literally there's no contact. Z, at least when he's home, if he's not in his room, if he's down here, you know, me and him can interact if we want to, but plenty of space.
I'm sure a good majority of the time you, like, don't have roommates in your eye line.
No, it feels like we have like our own like mini living spaces with some communal spaces. So it's almost like living in a dorm, which is, you know, an experience I missed out on, the closest thing I had was living at the apartments where you and Chris lived with us, well, not with us, but in the same complex,
yeah.
And then Tyler Marshall lived literally the apartment next door. We could walk from our one door to the other. So it, for all intents and purposes, felt like we lived with them for 2 years, which is probably why at the end of the first lease at the house, everyone was just kind of like, it's time.
Right.
It's time. And
it's
I
time
was
to spread out.
And you know, and so
Marshall and Zoe are getting they're going to want to live alone. You know, they're a
Yep.
couple. They've been together for so long.
Mhm.
It's not surprising to me that they would want to go
No,
out
it
on
wasn't
their own.
surprising. It didn't surprise me when anyone said that they wanted to not re-sign. Because even when we had the house, I was the only person who was like, I want to resign.
Yeah.
I want to resign because I don't like moving. That was nothing against them. It was just my big reason for not wanting to move is I really hate moving. It's a pain in the ass, especially when you're in a house, and I do own a lot of the furniture. I don't want to deal with that, especially not a washer and dryer. If I have to move into an apartment, I have to find one that will let me take out their unit and then put in my own,
Yeah.
which most will do. But a lot of times they'll be like, oh, you got to pay like a mover's fee to get the washer and dryer moved out.
Which is a pill.
Or you have to find one that's a new unit and they just haven't put one in yet. So, or like you have to find one that's like, because last year I was looking because we didn't know if we would get enough people to fill the house. And I was talking with the point to get an apartment. I was just like seeing, and they were like, well, we have one that'll be refurbished during that time period, which means we're going to take everything out anyway, and it's marked to replace the washer and dryer. We would just not put them back in.
Right.
And I was like, cool. And then I didn't end up having to do that because we kept the house, which is good. And it sounds like, fingers crossed, we'll keep the house another year, which I like. And then, you know, I am excited for when you guys have a house. Because then it'll be fun when you guys have people over and into your family house. And, you know, and I think that'll be exciting for, you know, having a family. Having a family in a house versus an apartment is such a different experience, especially if you guys can move into a neighborhood where there's a lot of people, you know, Juliet's age.
Right.
That was a cool part living in Nebraska versus New Mexico. New Mexico, you couldn't go run around the street with your friends. Like you could, but it was my parents never wanted me to. We moved here and they were like, get the hell out of the house. When the streetlights come on, come back in.
I had the exact same experience. We lived in Arizona, but we also lived in Mesa technically, but it was like in a big, fairly busy area of the city. We never really went out. Me and my sisters mostly stayed inside, and then we moved here, and I was never inside.
For the better and for worse, right? That's the Midwest charm. You know, it's safe enough that kids can go out and play with other kids and go walk around the neighborhood, go walk around the street, go walk to the gas station, whatever. And then once they become teenagers, they just get into all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, and that's just the way it is. That's being a teenager. I think that's part of the charm. Like, I've talked to, like, living in Tampa, I talked to people who had grown up in a city their whole life. And I would tell them stories about living in Nebraska. And most of my high school stories are pretty tame, mundane. But they're just like, I would tell them stories of other people that I knew who had, you know, your typical Midwest shenanigans.
Yep.
And they'd be like, oh my God, it sounds like a movie.
Cow tipping and...
I didn't know anyone who did that. I didn't know anyone, like, they asked me about that. They're like, do people, like, really tip cows? And I was like, I don't think that's a thing. I've never, you'd kill a cow doing that. Like, you'll hurt them.
Or you'd piss it off, which is the scarier part.
And so, well, I mean, you don't want to kill someone's cow because those are worth so much money.
Yeah.
That's property damage.
Yeah.
So that's, you know,
and trespassing.
Yep,
and,
all kinds of fun stuff that just stacks and stacks and stacks. But they're just like, oh my God, it's like, it sounds like a TV show. Like, do people really do that? Like, are there really parties like at someone's like house like that? Like at like a barn? I'm just like, yeah. That's like, that's a thing.
But it's not like a movie because the barn's not pretty. I'm sitting in here next to a 45-year-old tractor. The ceiling has a huge hole in it. There's spiders everywhere.
Yep. And you're not...
Just for a place to get drunk.
Yeah, and there's not a keg. There's not, you know, no one stole a keg from the liquor store. You're passing around a bottle of the shittiest UV blue that someone could get their older sibling to get their hands on.
Or your dad's bottle of Woodford that you're about to throw up because you don't know how to drink whiskey and you're trying to slam it as hard as you can.
So, and that's the interesting part about the Midwest is there's like the culture to it, and it's very homey. Like even in Omaha, we have this weird mix of city and small town vibe.
Right.
And it's so interesting how that reflects in the way people act. Some people act like they lived in a small town their whole life, and some people act like they've lived in the city their whole life. And you're just like, it really depends on what part of town you grew up in.
And look at Jake and Christopher. You would not guess that they grew up in the same room, let alone the same city.
They're such different people, and
very
they're
different interests.
so much fun to be around for insanely different reasons.
Yeah.
So, and and I love hanging out with you and Chris, and it's always fun when you guys get to come over. But the thing that I've found that I've really enjoyed was when we did Memorial Day.
That was so much fun.
I enjoyed being Uncle Joey so much. I enjoyed sitting out there with a beer, grilling, and just being the host and having really like my family there. And that's what it felt like, because the lads really are a family. And having everyone there with that kind of environment, I was thriving.
It was really nice.
I'm ready to go.
It felt like I don't know. It felt like a very memorable day, honestly, while it was happening.
And I don't know if you went through this, but like I had the family gatherings and the family reunions and stuff where everyone shows up. Yeah. I remember being the kid during that and how much fun those were as a kid, and then seeing the adults just standing there talking and being like, "Oh, God, you become an adult and it's boring." And now we've done that for the first time as adults, and I'm like, "Oh man, it's a different type of fun."
Yeah.
I'm having a good time, and then it's also a good time to see the kids running around and the kids having a good time. You're going, "Oh my God, I remember when I used to be a little shit bugging the dog."
Bullying all the adults. That's all Julia did all night. She put the fear of God into Eric's heart.
And that giant ball.
That giant ball that we brought. I don't know why we brought that. That was such a bad choice.
Oh, man. If only we had played Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
She would have thrived.
She would have had such a great time. She's such an interesting kid, because she's into the normal things that kids are into right now. Like I see her, she has YouTube because she has an iPad, and I hate that she has an iPad. Just to preface, so she gets about like an hour to a day on the weekends only.
Okay.
I have very strict rules about it.
Sure.
And I see what she watches on YouTube, and it's just like what you think a 5-year-old in 2024 is watching on YouTube. But then she gets really into. I just showed her Jumanji. She watched it 6 more times that same weekend. She was obsessed.
And that's not that crazy in my mind, because I remember being hyper fixated with shit as a kid all the time. I remember when I first watched Star Wars. That like broke my brain. Yeah. That experience is the specific experience of watching A New Hope the very first time is so ingrained in my brain that I have, like, when I watch that movie now, I have such visceral nostalgia that it's almost like painful. I'm like, oh my God, like I can remember not just the room, I can remember what I was doing, I can remember what toys I was playing with, I can remember like what the smell of that room was. I remember what time of year it was, like how hot it was outside. It's such a crazy thing in my brain. And I watched that movie I watched them the first time, and we were borrowing the VHS tapes from a family friend. I didn't give them back for like 3 months because I'd watched them on repeat constantly. Or, I'd find like another movie and I would just watch it on repeat. So I get that. I can understand where Juliet's at. She's like, oh, this is the shit. I got to watch this 100 times now.
Yep. You just hope that it's not going to be too complex. Jumanji's kind of scary. Actually, just watching it back, I realized how scary it was.
Yeah, I found something recently, and I'll try to find it again because I forgot to bookmark it because it was something that I was very interested. Someone on Reddit basically put together an entire YouTube playlist of children's television that was like from like when we were growing up. So it was, things like older Sesame Street.
Oh yeah.
Like Reading Rainbow. I loved Reading Rainbow. Between the Lions, stuff of that nature. Some Disney stuff from that era, like Bear in the Big Blue House, Blue's Clues. Stuff like that.
Bear in the Big Blue House. That was my favorite show. Oh my God.
We saw
back memories.
Yep. Right. and they compiled a playlist on YouTube of it, and they went, "This is the only stuff that we show our kids on YouTube. This is it. This is what we show them." Yeah. And they have like, and I read like the thread, and their kid's like 2. They're like really young. And like, this is what we're showing them as far as TV. This is the only TV they're watching. We're not showing them anything that we watch. They don't have a YouTube account. This is what we play when we give them screen time, because this is what we think is the best lineup of educational television. And then there's Bluey in there. Bluey's in there too, because Bluey is
Bluey's
such a...
great.
It is. Kimba really loves Bluey. I was telling Henry this, and I think I told Jake this. So when I turn on YouTube on the TV, because when we're down in the basement, Kimba he has to distract himself somehow. Like, I really took a break from playing games the past like 4 months, and so Kimba's really not used to me sitting down for long periods of time not playing with him. And so I'm like, well, I want to get back into games a little bit. And so I've put on the TV for him. And I do it upstairs too when people are over. If I have to put him upstairs and he hears that people are in the living room, he barks still. So I put on Bluey upstairs for him because he can see the colors. It's the same color palette that he can see.
That's so nice.
But when I turn on the YouTube app and like the little sound that YouTube makes when it turns on, he recognizes that. And I watched it this weekend, the other day, I think it was Thursday or Friday night. I turned on YouTube. He heard the noise, ran from under my desk, jumped on the couch, laid down, and just stared at the TV. I hadn't even put Bluey on yet, and he knew what I was doing. And I was like, oh my God, I have an iPad kid. I raised an iPad kid, and it's a dog. And so, but he enjoys it, and it gives him some stimulation for a little bit.
Maybe Bluey can teach him how to emotionally regulate.
Well, that's what the Prozac's for. And then it's so interesting having a dog. And then I'm just like, I looked into his breed and how long he should live if he gets a healthy lifestyle, healthy life. And I was thinking like, oh my God, like if life goes the way I would like it to, and I find a partner and I'm having children at the age I want to have children at, my kid would be like 10. Like Kimba will be their childhood dog.
Yeah.
And that's weird to think about because my parents still have my later childhood dogs. Like when I was like 10, those were the dogs that they got in like middle school and high school. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's so weird to think that like now I'm in the part of my life where I have my kid's childhood dog right now. Like that'll be the old dog. Like my parents had an old dog. And I remember them very briefly. Not really. But my parents told me about it. And they were like, this is the dog. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
That was like my mom's dog that they had in like her high school. Like when she was in high school.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, oh, this is so weird to think about. Like how long dogs live, but also how short they live.
Yeah.
Like 13 years, 14 years. Kimba can be like 16 to 17 is his lifespan. And I'm just like, that's a long time, but then also I think about that, I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, that's short.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, for a human, that's like, you're like, oh, that's 16 years. That's not even all of high school. You're not even an adult yet. 16 years for a dog, that dog is like 200.
Right. That's old. I mean, some dogs, they don't get to live that long either. They only get to live to be like 8 or 9. That's why I'm worried about. My mom has 3 Frenchies. And I'm like, these dogs, they are all only like 3 years old, and I swear they're all going to die like tomorrow every time I see them.
Frenchies just have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
A lot of those breeds do. But, it's
all
interesting.
Bulldogs,
And you were talking about at some point getting a dog.
Yep, I want hounds.
Hounds?
Yep.
Like basset hounds?
I like a basset hound. I love a plot hound.
Okay.
I used to have a brindle plot hound, and then a family friend adopted her from me because I couldn't keep her anymore. And I didn't find out until later, she was about 50 pounds overweight with me. Because they're one of the breeds you're supposed to be able to like see their ribs. Like they're supposed to be lean.
Yeah.
And she was a big girl. So she was adopted by a family friend who started taking her on runs every day. And I just had to look at her and be like, you're so much happier without me.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And with Kimba, he's skinny like that.
Yep.
But he's so fluffy. Like you can't see his ribs,
Yeah.
but if you pull up his fluff, like you can see a very distinct line of where he's at. And he's healthy. He eats the amount he should. He gets enough activity, but
Yeah, you can just tell he's supposed to.
He's
supposed to be a
fluffy.
skinny guy.
He's also going to be much more fluffy as he approaches full maturity.
Oh yeah.
Because he'll get the full coat. He's maybe half his fluff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm going to need a better vacuum.
He's gonna look like an extra large Pomeranian.
Pretty much, yeah. So, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Oh my gosh.
I feel like we just kind of rambled this week.
I know, right? How deep in are we?
We are at.
What do I need to bullshit about?
We're at about an hour. So.
What, about an hour?
We're at about an hour. We did about 36 minutes the first before intermission, and we've done about 22. So we're literally at about an hour mark. So
do you want to talk about the wedding
doubled
for like 5 minutes?
We can, yeah, for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And we can get out of here.
Yeah. So God, it was just such a wonderful day. I was so excited the whole time, and it's so interesting to see. And I talked about it at your wedding when I got to speak. It's so interesting to see Chris without you, because I was like, and you know, I knew you guys were getting married. I've known that for so long, and and I know how close you two are. But I always see you guys together now,
right?
And and the bachelor party, was
like a vacation.
Yep, and so the vibes were very different. Like, but the day before the wedding, when I was sitting with Chris and we were outside smoking hookah, I was just like, oh my God, he's not a whole person without Mac. Like you could tell the being forced to be away. Like the bachelor party, he was like, I'm going on vacation. And I've traveled with Chris 2 other times besides the bachelor party. I've gone to Mardi Gras with him, and I went to San Francisco with him.
And you guys go to the Ozarks every year.
Every year. And that's always like I'm taking a vacation. I'm not being forced out of the apartment.
Yeah.
And that night being forced to, and then there was probably the wedding, like,
the jitters.
Yeah, I don't know if he had jitters. I think it maybe was just that level of excitement to just be married. And he was just a completely, like, you could tell there was just a piece of him that was not present at that moment. And I was like, oh my God, he's marrying the person. Like, that's crazy how you can see that with someone, like when they're talking or when they're not together, and you're just like, that's his person. And it's so great that you have found each other, and the ceremony was so beautiful.
I thought so. I was so grateful to have you there.
It was
in the wedding.
It was such a wonderful time. And then I had to spend so much time with Juliet.
Yeah.
we played I Spy the Little Brat, just switching it up.
She's the worst with that. I won't play that game with her anymore. Now we play the alphabet game.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the ones my parents really liked, the alphabet game.
We have a lot of fun with that.
Yep.
It was nice to have you speak though at the wedding, because they were freaking me out. You were doubted by many parties.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because apparently the night before it was like Jacob and Eric and
Tarek. They came down here and they practiced their speech.
And you didn't want to practice with them.
I was like, I'm gonna wing it.
And they did not think you could pull it out of your ass. I was like, don't doubt Joey.
There's a lot of words in my head that go through. Like, as part of the thing of I talk a lot. It's why I made a podcast, because as my parents put it, I talk as much as a bird shits out its ass. So
you're a professional yapper.
I was born to yap.
You were.
But it's one of those things that, like, I thought about what I was going to say the day Chris asked me. When Chris asked me, do you want to speak? I was like, yeah. If you want me to, I will absolutely speak. And as soon as he said that, I basically put together what I was going to say in my head. And then that night it changed. Seeing that experience with Chris one-on-one. Yeah. It changed what I was going to say very briefly. Only part of it changed. And I was like, okay, I'm good. Like, I didn't need to write it down. And in my opinion, sometimes when you write something down, you can lose some of you're overthinking what you're going to say. And when it's supposed to be heartfelt, like at a wedding, sometimes you lose a little bit of the emotion because you're trying to produce it. You're trying to think of what in the moment is going to sound nice. What story am I going to tell? You maybe overthink it. And I don't think anyone did. I think all of the speeches were good. I think everyone did a great job. For me, it was just, I'm just going to speak from the heart. It's going to be very heartfelt. I just want to speak emotionally to you and Chris, you know, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter speaking to any of the guests.
Mm-hmm.
What I was saying was absolutely just directed at you and Chris. And so, and I thought it went well.
It did go really well.
So-
Honestly, everyone, you know, I think that we all kind of had it in our minds. We didn't want it to be one of those weddings that was just like a bunch of photo ops for 9 hours.
Yeah.
You know, want it to be like a real celebration of love, and we
And it felt
all
that
made
way.
that happen. Yeah.
It felt that way.
With everyone running
was-
around making sure it
was-
happened.
It was such a beautiful day, and I was so happy that you guys let me be a part of that. Obviously, just going to someone's wedding is one thing, but being a part of it was you were surrounded by the people you
Mhm.
picked to be surrounded by, and to be a part of that was special in its own right. So it was a special day for you guys, and I was glad to be a part of it. And you set the bar very high for lads' weddings.
I can't wait. Let's do it on the record. I'll bet you $5. Who do you think is going to get engaged next?
Engaged next.
Yeah, engaged next. Not married. Engaged next.
Ooh. I have to do this on the record.
On the record, $5.
I want to make this known. I'm saying this on the record. I genuinely do not know anything.
Neither of us do.
I genuinely do not. I know I'm friends with everyone in the group. I genuinely do
No
not
one
know
trusts us with
anything.
that information. They know that we would both yap.
I genuinely do not know anything. If someone has something planned, it is purely coincidence. I swear to fucking God. I do not know anything.
Okay.
Do not.
Who's your bet?
Marshall and Zoe.
Oh,
Marshall and Zoe would probably be my bet.
Marshall and Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to bet Nathan and Anna.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that. There we go. On the record.
On the record,
$5.
Nathan and Anna, Marshall and Zoe. $5.
$5.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And again, neither of us have any information.
No one tells
we're
us
not
shit.
privy. There's no insider trading going on. This is I don't know anything. You don't know anything.
I would
we'll just
never
see.
hustle you, Joey.
It's only $5. If you were gonna hustle me, that number would have been higher. Let's be honest.
That's true. That's
you
very
would have been
true.
like you would have been like $100, $1,000. You know, ownership rights to the YouTube channel.
Exactly.
Something like that. Okay, it has been such a pleasure to have you here. I would love to have you on at some point again. I think the next time will probably be when we move up to 3 people. That's the plan for the future. At some point, probably next year, I would love to have you and Chris on. At some point, I do want to have Chris on and talk
I
to
think
him.
you and Chris would make a great episode. I also
I think
think
so.
me, you, and Anna.
Would be
Yeah.
Anna's.
I'm setting that up now.
Anna needs to be on at some point. She was very adamant about that last night, and I was like, okay, you're on the list. Everyone's on the list. There's no one in our group who I don't want to sit down and talk
Right.
to. But it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. This is the absolute longest episode. I'm so happy about that. This is the actual length I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad that we hit it for once. And
Great stuff.
yeah, if you guys enjoyed this podcast, you can go follow our social media accounts. All of them are listed at joeymoments.com. Thank you, and we will see you again next week.